Welcome to a special interview episode of Adult Music featuring saxophonist Lenny Pickett and drummer percussionist John Hadfield. Thanks to Joe Brent from Adhyâropa Records for reaching out to us to talk to Lenny and John in anticipation of their new release on Adhyâropa, Heard by Others 2, coming out Friday, June 6th.
Yeah, and heard by us too. We just heard it this week. It was pretty good.
You know, Adhyâropa releases a lot of recordings that don't fit neatly into other genre categories, such as our friend Jason Kaiser's Grassology.
Right, and this one too. And they both kind of fit into the adult music, category. So I guess we're okay. They found their niche.
We're going to call this episode Heard Around the World. One thing I can guarantee you is that whether you know it or not, if you've had a radio or television turned on in the last 50 years, you've heard Lenny Pickett. He was a member of the great Tower of Power, the music director of the Saturday Night Live band for 3 decades. He led his own group, the Borneo Horns, and he's played saxophone on recordings by people such as Rod Stewart, John Lee Hooker, David Bowie, Paul McCartney, Madonna, Mick Jagger, Laurie Anderson, Ravi Shankar, Philip Glass, Mariah Carey, Katy Perry, David Byrne. Should I go on?
Well, you really had my attention there, and then you started naming some people at the end I wasn't too interested in, so maybe you should stop there.
Anyway, yeah, covering multiple generations of all styles of music. And John Hadfield also has an interesting and varied musical resume. In addition to his own projects, he's appeared on more than 100 recordings as a guest artist and performed with artists such as Yo-Yo Ma, Rachel Eckworth, Ron Blake, Kenny Werner, just to name a few. He's also performed with the Saturday Night Live band on NBC, the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, and he's played percussion on movie soundtracks such as Gemini Man and The Joker. So you've likely heard his playing as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
Now in this new recording, Heard by Others 2, Lenny and John expand on the possibilities of modern recording technology that were really a necessity during COVID to collaborate remotely on the first Heard by Others recording. That's from 2020. Here they incorporate electronic music using synthesizers, both new and vintage, and that's combined with Lenny playing the whole family of saxes from Barry to soprano and John Hadfield's drums and percussion. So we learned something new about electronic music that we don't often venture into, Mike.
Yeah, this was pretty interesting to talk to them. Electronic music is something I listen to and I always wonder, oh, how is that done? And then, just to talk to the people doing it is really interesting. You get a little bit of insight into how those sounds are made.
I have a Korg synth that I use for keyboard things for live music, and a little bit of programming has gone into that, but that's about my limit. This was really interesting to get into more computer-generated and synthy stuff for us.
Right. I used to hear things about electronic music where this key triggers something, and then my mind would just stop working at that point. It's okay, just let me hear it. I don't know what's going on here.
Right. Links for both albums are in the description, and you can get a physical copy on CD of the new recording. Lenny joins us from New York and John from France to tell us about how their friendship began at NYU and led to continued musical collaboration. And they give us insight into the new music, and we check out some samples of the new tunes as well.
Let's get going with the interview.
Lenny Pickett and John Hadfield, welcome to Adult Music.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've got this new recording coming out, Heard by Others 2. And so it's kind of a continuation of a project that you two started a ways back. And that's where I'd like to kind of start out. You two met and started playing when you were both teaching at NYU. Is that correct?
That's right.
That's right.
And both of you have a lot of varied genres in your musical background. How did you sort of make a meeting of musical minds with what you had in common while you were there?
We were playing in the faculty ensemble together. Actually, the first time I think I played with John, I had a class that I taught Borneo Horns music to. It was 2 other saxophone players. And I think John came in as a drummer and winged it once. You remember that?
Yeah.
It's in the auditorium. That music I used to invite, when the actual group was together, I would invite different drummers to come play if our drummer wasn't able to, and not give them very much preparation, just to sort of let them hear the music and play. And I had Steve Jordan played with us, and David Garibaldi played with us once.
Oh, wow. And what did you feel you had together that would be something unique to explore further from just playing an ensemble?
Time. John has good time. And most of the music that I do is all about that.
Right.
So, and also when we played in the faculty ensemble, what do we call ourselves? Combo Nouveau. We would have opportunities where we would, be essentially playing out in front of the rest of the group, and it was a melding of the minds that happened. We vibed off with each other.
Wow, excellent.
So,
Yeah, definitely. I always felt a strong connection with Lenny, and both musically and personally, I felt connected, and it was something that I always wanted to further develop and have the opportunity to explore.
we both have families, and John's a few years behind me, but we both have a daughter and a son, and we both lived in New York and had to deal with that.
Right.
So we had stories to tell about education for the kids and, living exigencies. And, New York City is not a very hospitable place for families, especially musicians.
Right.
Finding a way to make a steady living is always a big challenge. And New York is great on one level because you can stay in town and work if you have the jobs. But recently it's become more and more about being a Broadway musician and playing weddings and things like that. It used to be studio work was a lot more abundant. So we commiserated and, exchanged notes about life in New York with a family.
Right. It's always more about how you connect on a personal level rather than technical ability. I think if you can keep things going with people, that's what I always hear.
Definitely.
It makes a difference if you understand where each other is coming from. You don't have to apologize for anything.
Right. Understand each other's personalities. Looking at the history from the first recording, you started out debuting this duo live. John, you had an annual percussion festival.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for a while I was curating shows at a now defunct club called Cornelia Street Cafe.
And so that was 2016 or so?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
I noticed you have one video of the two of you on your YouTube channel, and I watched that. I shared it with Mike, and he said, wow, great grooves.
Yeah, I kind of got into that, the rhythm of the whole thing right away.
Thank you.
So what I was wondering, you've got this great groove and this history of playing together, and that rhythmic element was one of the things that made you enjoy that. And this recording project started during COVID. Lenny, you were on the West Coast, is that correct?
Right.
And John's in New York. How do you translate that great live groove into something you have to record separately? Was that a challenge to keep going?
There's different aspects of groove. Part of it is physical, and part of it's conceptual. And I think the conceptual part of it is maintained despite the lack of physical proximity. We both had this similar ideas about how to approach rhythm. And so they meshed with one another. John would send me things and I would send him things, and we would, riff off of that. It was basically how it happens.
Right. So the first recording, Heard by Others, is there some significance in that title?
I mean, I think maybe that was more of just like a reference of since this was a COVID thing about the isolation of not being heard and then us creating something for other people to hear and explore. I think that was kind of the discussion. We didn't have a real, a brainstorming session about it at all. I think the title just kind of popped up and it resonated with both of us, so we stuck with it. And actually, during COVID, I was actually in rural France. I was not in New York. I left. We both actually fled.
Right.
Was it any better out there?
Oh yeah, for me it was way better. I was in I had much more space, and I had a studio. The studio that I have in Paris now, the start of it was kind of there, and so so I had gear and.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost anything was better than being in New York City at that point.
Yeah.
Right. So that was out in 2020. That was on Orenda Records. And before I listened to the new one, I wanted to make sure I listened to that.
We both did.
In the Bandcamp notes there, John, you said this was basically using electronic technology while making primarily acoustic music. So, Lenny, you play clarinet on that and mainly the saxes, and John's mainly doing just percussion and drums. There's not much of an electronic musical component on that one.
Yeah, less so there. So the electronic music rears its head in the formulation of the music, because the techniques for using click tracks and things like that are things that are pretty much in the domain of electronic music. And, all the editing possibilities all enters into the world of electronics. But when we did it the more recent project, I was home, and I didn't have this machine here with me in California, so I could employ this. And John, I think, branched out more with his electronics as well.
You mentioned this machine. Can you tell us what that is? Because this isn't going to be a video.
It's an analog synthesizer from the 70s. I got interested in electronic music when I was pretty young. I had all of Tomito's stuff and the switched on Bach things, and I listened a lot to the Tonto's Expanding Headband and things like that. And I had a sort of large collection of vinyl electronic music, including digital stuff from Earcam. And I was sort of one of the better known exponents of rhythm and blues / rock saxophone playing. So I was on the list of people that Computone, the people who invented the Lyricon, sent their instruments to. And they sent me an instrument to demonstrate for them. I think it was Tom Scott and Wayne Shorter and me and a few other people all got these instruments. And I played around with it, but it was sort of frustrating because it had like basically one kind of elaborate sound, but it was limited. And I approached Patrick Leeson, the synthesist who was with Herbie Hancock on Sextant and Crossings, those two albums. And they had sort of expanded Herbie's electronic palette. And we became friends, and he helped me put together a system that sort of expanded on the possibilities of wind-controlled electronics. And this is the result of it, this instrument that I have.
And so on this new recording, you're using the EMU wind-controlled instrument?
Yes. This is the EMU, this large modular synthesizer.
Okay.
And I control it with a wind synthesizer driver. It's called the Computone wind synthesizer driver. The sound of generating device is the EMU, which is like a Moog or like a Buchla or like a ARP. But it was EMU's first product. They made about 200 systems. And they mostly went to universities and recording studios. But a few people had them on the road, and this was one of them.
Wow. Is it easy to keep that maintained and functioning after all these years?
It held up very well. It was very solidly built. The potentiometers are all Cermet sealed, so they don't get dust inside the pots. And
right.
So it doesn't have a scratchy sound on it. It still works pretty good.
Wow, great.
Yeah. Oh, John, just while we're on the topic, it says here that you used a Teenage Engineering OP1 and EP133 KO2. Can you tell us what those are?
Yeah, sure. I'm a big fan of the Teenage Engineering instruments in general. And the OP1, it's not an analog synth, but it's a very tiny synth that I use often. It has sort of like modular components and aspects to it. But lots of times I will do things like the tune Joshua Tree that's on the record. I kind of wrote it initially in Sibelius, and then I will export the MIDI, and then I send the MIDI back to the synth, which then plays it. But then I manipulate the synth in real time and then record it. So that's one way that I kind of use it to create sounds. The other instrument is a sampler. I think I also use a Roland 404, but I will kind of just either sample myself or Lenny and then manipulate that and then record that and then process that into the sound just to kind of affect the sound and adjust it the way that I like it.
Okay. This is a more recent synthesizer too. This isn't from the 70s or anything like that.
Yeah, no. And I also have I don't think I use it on the record, but yeah, no, they're not. They're there's an OPXY that was released 6 months ago.
Okay.
But I kind of got into those, and the beautiful thing about those synths also is that they're tiny. They can go in your backpack. You can bring them on tour. You can use a USB-C cable to put it directly into your computer and record actually that way on an airplane, on a train. Yeah.
With my synth, you need two roadies.
Yeah, exactly. Lenny's, you need an extra room in the apartment, and
What was your path into electronic music, John? Was it from backing tracks and electronic drums and then just expanding into synth backing and making your own bass tracks and stuff?
I think the appeal of it was more, I always had a connection to it, and also the fact that percussion music to me and percussive sounds, there's such a parallel to electronic sounds. So many sounds that I can make on a percussion instrument to me reflect a sort of electronic sound. And actually, Lenny and I have talked about this before because on the first album, there's a track called Alto Claire. And I always said, to me, that sounds like Lenny can produce such a sort of electronic-y sound on the clarinet. So the acoustic instruments are kind of mimicking electronic instruments. And also on some level, electronic instruments are mimicking acoustic. So,
Right.
but yeah, what's my in? I think that was kind of my in. And then over time, just spending more time with the synthesizers and exploring it and try to making that my own voice the way I attempted to with drums and percussion.
Right. So the first album and this new release is kind of the same recipe inside. You got 2 tunes by each of you. And the 2 tunes from Lenny on this new one are really groove oriented, especially the first one. These come from a larger series of compositions then, Lenny? Dance music for 4 saxophones. We've got number 5 and number 8 on the new release.
There's 8 altogether, and they were composed for a dance performance in Manhattan at St. Mark's Church, a place called Dance Space, for a choreographer named Steve Petronio. The piece is called The Drift with Clifford Arnell. He just sort of gave me free rein to compose the piece for him. So it's about 45 minutes of saxophone quartets. And those are the 2 pieces that are on the recording are representative of that. I recorded all the parts myself.
Yeah.
So you're on Barry, tenor, alto, and soprano. Amazing. How did you go about recording that? Did you start at the bottom and work up, or?
Yeah, typically, I started with the instrument that had the most mode of communication in it. Like if it was carrying the melody, I would start with that. And then I would record all 4 of them and then start re-recording them again. So I would record the baritone part twice and the tenor part twice, so that by the time they'd all played, they'd had a chance to hear each other, so to speak, and be influenced by the sound of the adjacent saxophones. And I cut it to a click, which I made with an analog oscillator driving a very primitive digital sequencer, subdividing the click into 16th notes. And when John got the tracks, he had to sort of search around for the exact tempo because the low frequency oscillator drifts a little bit. So it doesn't stay completely accurate all the way through. It's not like a digital generated click track. So it's a bit different from that.
So you added drums and percussion after that. That must have been kind of a challenge after hearing this one.
It was fun. Yeah, it's true. I did move it, not over, but, I had to find some stuff with the drift. But, it was grooving before I added the drums. So it was fun to play with.
This has a really crazy intro, and then it settles into this groove. There's kind of 2 main sections that the tune starts out with, but more kind of new riff ideas come along and then get reincorporated. And it doesn't stay in a steady time. There's some 2-beat measures that come along in there in the second section. And so it's constantly bringing on new rhythmic surprises. Did you just kind of feel that out as you were going along?
I composed it, on paper before I played it. And I usually with the saxophone in my lap, I play it. And I was interested at the time in uneven phrase lengths,
Right.
So there's sections of the music where every saxophone's playing a different length of phrase. And they cycle around and they loop and join one another periodically. So it's a technique that's like phasing, like the early Steve Reich pieces, It's Gonna Rain, that sort of thing, where the phase of the rhythm cycles around and creates new compositional material as it's happening. It's something you can do with tape and electronics that makes sense. Even though it's all acoustic instruments, it was created in the spirit of a electronic music piece.
Right. Now that we've built that up, everyone's going to want to hear it. So let's play a sample of that. This is the first track on the new recording heard by others too. Dance music for 4 saxophones, number 5. Let's hear it. That's a lot of fun to listen to, too. Every time I hear it, I catch something new that's going on between the different lines going there.
Yeah, lots of great detail in that.
How long did it take you to work out all the recording of the parts on that, Lenny?
I did the whole thing in 2 weeks. I had a deadline.
Okay. There's another big surprise coming up at the ending with something new, too. So make sure you listen to that whole track, everyone. And you kind of alternate on this release, too. So the next tune is your Joshua Tree, John. This has got kind of a more synthy, mysterious mood. In the notes you mentioned, you're influenced here by the music of Terry Riley. And then I guess that would come from a sort of classical minimalism influence in general taken to electronic music.
Yeah, definitely. That's right. That's funny. I mean, even when Lenny was just referencing the sort of cyclical nature of the last piece, obviously Terry's piece in C is also a similar concept. He's also a Japanese resident, I believe now.
Huh. Oh, really? I have to look that up. I know that he's still alive, but...
Yeah, he is. Yeah, and his son is also very active as a guitar player.
Okay.
So, but yeah, anyways, I wrote this piece around the time where I was a Joshua Tree, and that's kind of what stuck with me. It's fun. It has sort of like a cascading line effect that happens. I made sort of a not standard drum percussion setup in my studio and recorded that and sent it over to Lenny, and I loved what he did. I didn't write anything for him, if I remember correctly, and it turned out wonderfully.
I didn't write anything for John either. I had a chart of the piece. I'd send it to him, but did I send you the sheet music for the 4 saxophone pieces?
Yeah, for the saxophone pieces, yeah, you did. And then once we settled on a form, I kind of made my own just so I could just read it because it was, I mean, the saxophone pieces, 4 instruments, it was kind of lengthy.
Yeah, and I sent you not parts, but the score. So
the score, handwritten.
Handwritten, yes.
Yeah.
So you're basically trusting each other's instincts to put something on in addition that you know you'll both be satisfied with.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. There's a lot of synthesized sound here. What should we listen for in your part on this one, Lenny?
The high synthesizer leads.
Yeah, let's take a listen to this one. Track number 2, Joshua Tree. Let that one go a little longer so we could hear that line. It's got kind of a mysterious floating feel to it.
Yeah, and I also want to mention the really cool bass end of that recording too. Is really powerful. I have a subwoofer in the house, and it just gave me a lot of pleasure. Really enjoyed listening to that. Adult music are big fans of the low end of instruments and just the low end in general. We really like bass sounds.
Great. Actually, yeah, the album was mixed and mastered by Sam Anai, who is a great bass player.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, check him out. He plays on a lot of wonderful projects also, as well as engineering.
All right. Well, he made that come out loud and clear. I really appreciated it.
And the third track is back to the dance music for 4 saxophones. I guess this is the last one, number 8. And this one is really interesting. You've got a panning effect going on with the saxes that sort of goes from ear to ear. And I noticed there's some really cool staccato backing notes in this that you're doing, Lenny. Like I was reminded what John was saying, the crossover between acoustic and electronic. Sometimes you hear those kind of tones used as backing, and the Barry line on this one really stands out.
Yeah, there's a long section of multiphonics in the alto, tenor, and baritone parts where I'm playing more than one tone at the same time on the saxophone. And with the slap tongue effect, it gives it an electronic music kind of vibe.
I noticed that. And in the middle, you get into some squawking that you really build upon. And by the end of that section, it actually comes out sounding metallic and electronic. The tone sort of transforms as you go through that section. I found that pretty interesting.
Multiphonics.
As it works to the end of this one, there's a real loop feeling that you're conscious of. And then you have this kind of stacking arpeggio that finishes it up. I like how there's a lot of surprises that keep coming along as it evolves. Let's take a listen to this one, track 3, Dance Music for 4 Saxophones, number 8. Yeah, the other thing that makes me think of is almost muted rhythm guitar with the slap tongue thing that you're doing. It sounds so cool.
Yeah, I like to make the sax do all the stuff.
The other thing I'd like people to hear is the ending of this one because it's so cool. Let's check out the ending of this one as well. Very cool.
I also really like that kind of kind of effect. It kind of put me back in the 1970s. You know, I think they used that sound on the $6 Million Man.
Oh yeah, that kind of sound.
Yeah, I remember that every time he would do something with his bionic strength, they would play that sound.
The bass drum sounds absolutely huge on this one, John.
Oh, thank you. I gotta say, I don't really know the $7 Million Man reference.
The $6 Million Man.
Oh, sorry.
What do they call that effect? The that
kind of glitching or something.
Yeah, there was a show in the 70s. You might be too young for this. The $6 Million Man with Lee Majors was in it, and he was like part machine because he had lost an arm or something. So he had this super strength with this kind of like new technology. And every time he would be using that technology, they'd show it in slow motion, and they'd play that sound. You can check it out on YouTube. Just
cool.
Look on $6 Million Man and. It'll inevitably come up. It's pretty funny. But people of our age are going to have that reference right away when you hear that sound. Yeah.
Here you're getting the real kind of cutting tone on the alto, Lenny, but then the Barry sounds so fat in there. How was it as a saxophone player to take all the parts on all the instruments and then like hear yourself doing everything? It must be kind of an interesting experience. It's a lot different from playing in a horn section where you're just balancing out your one voice.
I've been experimenting with that sort of thing on tape for quite a while, and I've made a piece subsequent to that where I have 36 saxophones.
Wow.
Playing together. And something about using the same family of instruments has like a unifying quality to it. You know Glenn Branca's work with the mini guitars,
Right.
like 50 guitars playing at the same time. Sort of that sort of sound. You hear the same overtone series in all the different sizes of saxophones, and sort of like maybe a little bit like pygmy flute music, some sort of thing.
Actually, I have a question, Lenny. And did you record all those in the room you're in now, or?
No, this is the second generation of this room. There was what do they call it, a gut renovation took place, and put this room in after that. New York City, finding a place to record, finding a place to practice for saxophone players is always the deal. You have to figure out something.
Yeah.
In this particular piece, I said, Dance Piece number 4, and this is really true of the first track, too, that there's a comic joy to all of this. Leonard, you seem to have a really good musical sense of humor, and I'm kind of wondering, where does that come from? Like, what influences you to write like this?
I think it's a sign of a well-spent childhood.
Well-spent childhood. And how did you spend that childhood? What did you do?
Playing clarinet on the streets with my friends, and playing in rhythm and blues groups and bars when I was too young to be there. You see a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I imagine.
So, yeah.
I think Louis Armstrong said the same thing about playing in the brothels in New Orleans back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, I always think it's an interesting quality of a piece. There's so much music that's great technically. There's music that has a lot of feeling. But when I hear a line and it makes me smile, that kind of visceral reaction.
At the same reaction.
That's special. Yeah. And I think it takes a kind of unique sense. And so I'm always happy when I find someone who can tell me sort of like a musical joke, even if it's couched inside of a larger composition. I find that a special enjoyment in music.
We call it playing music. It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think spontaneity is part of the humor of music too, because it's just, like telling a joke. It's just something people don't expect, and it just sort of appears.
Yeah, the adjacent oppositional things that come together.
Huh.
Yeah, a punchline in harmony or melody.
Yeah, the unexpected.
Yeah. All right, and the last track is your second composition, Jungle Room, John, and this is more of a synthy type of sound here too. There's acoustic sax in here as well, distant and atmospheric, coming in a lot of different spots. What's the genesis of this one, John?
The genesis was I wrote it on tour, and I kind of came up with the first sort of fragmented, the sort of unison line together. And then I just had the idea of that it would be fun to have a piece where the form is the standard sort of approach you have with any sort of jazz tune we improvise over it, but it changes tempos. And so that's what happens in this piece also. And so it's fun to play live also, because it can be a game in which I have everything programmed to a pad and I control the tempo of the song, where I can kind of dictate where it goes, and it can be unexpected.
This one has a line in the melody that kind of reminds me of Harlem Nocturne. So when I heard that, and then I heard acoustic sax in the mix too, I thought that was kind of charming. The other thing that stood out to me on this one is the bass line is really busy and moving around.
Yeah, that bass line was kind of a bit of an accident, because it was created by using the sort of ARP function on a synthesizer, playing the chords and having it randomly generate the structure and the flow, the arpeggiator, in different ways. And then I went in, that was kind of the way it started, and then I went in and shaped it a little more specifically. But
oh, okay. Yeah, it caught my ear as something unique that, now that you mentioned how it was kind of created, it doesn't sound like something someone would normally just think of as a pattern. So
no, I've given it to bass players to play live, and people have been annoyed. So
I can imagine.
Yeah, no, we're not annoyed, but it's definitely not written to be played necessarily on the bass. Yeah.
Right. All right, let's take a listen to this one, Jungle Room. to let it get into some of that tempo change. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The whole atmosphere is sort of like a detective film noir, dark corner of the city kind of feeling to it. It's an interesting vibe. How did you go about approaching your lines with the sax in there, Lenny?
I played also the synthesizer part, melodic synthesizer part. I played that first. I have like a patch set up where the wind transducer is controlling both the frequency of the low-pass filter, and I have a little bit of high-pass filter tracking with that too. Also the dynamics, and they're sort of balanced in such a way that as I increase the dynamic change, the filter opens up. And there's 3 oscillators tuned to unison, but beating against each other. So it makes sort of a broad kind of ambient sort of phasing kind of quality to it. There's no other effect added to it, just that and some reverb. But then after I put that down, I thought it would be nice to have the saxophone make commentary on that. So I played along to the track and edited out what I didn't like and kept what I did. Most of it's an improvisation. The saxophone part is all improvisation. There's parts of the line that I'm playing in the beginning, especially as it was composed, that I'm playing along with something that John put on there.
That adds a lot of atmosphere, especially the way it's kind of reverby and set off to the side.
Also, there's the component of the wind-controlled sound so that you have a much more vocal-like quality to the sound than you usually get with a keyboard synthesizer. I'm affecting the sound with the movement of my lips and the movement of the airstream. So it's sort of a very humanized kind of approach to synthesizer.
That's always important, keeping that same sort of feeling that you can put, especially through a wind instrument. I know on trumpet especially, your lips are generating the sound. In sax too, it's coming from your breath. How do you translate that individual human voice into electronics? I think that's always kind of a challenge, isn't it?
It's a challenge. And the instrument I'm working with that was the intention all along, to be able to do that. And it feels a lot like playing a wind instrument, even though it's exclusively electronic. The sense of it is very parallel to the way that an acoustic wind instrument sounds.
Right. So you get that same sort of feedback from the instrument itself.
The aural feedback from listening to it. And like when you're playing the piano, you strike a key and you're done.
Yeah.
You can massage the sound continuously. So that was my interest in it, was to make that contribution to the track. Sort of take the electronics and humanize them a little bit.
Yeah. All right, those are the 4 tracks heard by others too on Adhyâropa Records. This is coming out Friday, June 6th. And listeners can get this on physical media as well, right?
That's correct. CD for now.
That's the way I roll.
Is it really? Yeah.
I love CD. Yeah, I have thousands of them. In another room. I should have recorded in that room.
Mike has more CDs than anyone I've ever seen.
Great.
We'll put up the link for the Bandcamp site so listeners can order it. What do you have planned in the future for projects? Do you plan on doing another duo project sometime soon?
We haven't really talked about it, but probably. But to see what Que Sera, Sera.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. We're doing another project.
Okay.
Is there anything else individually that you guys are working on that you'd like to mention for people to watch out for? I know I listened to Brad Shepik's recent recording with you on that, John, and that was kind of interesting. Anything else you've got going on individually you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
I'm still assembling my website. There's a lot of material up there now, but it's called lennypickettmusic.com. There's lots of different types of music, and I'm continually adding to it. It's a sort of a jukebox kind of a situation with a graphic that you click on things and it opens up other things, and you can play with the graphics with the cursor on your computer and move it around. That's my current project.
I'll check that out. Sounds like fun.
I'm doing a bunch of other projects as well. I played in a group with Brad Shepik. We have a trio actually with Sam and I who mixed and mastered this record called Believers. I also have a duo with a pianist named Rachel Eckroth, and we have a record that just came out also on Adhyâropa. Also, I play in a trio with also a friend of Lenny, Ron Blake, who has a new group called it's Scratch Band. We're going to play this summer at Lincoln Center. That's really cool. With Ruben Rogers, the great bass player. They're from Virgin Islands, and it's Scratch Band is sort of the music from there and our take on it. I wrote a piece also for electronics and cello and drums. We're going to play that under the A Train this summer in August in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
So that should be kind of wild if you're around in Far Rockaway. Yeah, just continuing, the nonstop music making, hopefully.
I did watch the video of you and Rachel Eckroth together. If you want to see some interaction between piano and drums, I found that captivating to see how you two
thanks.
were playing off from each other's grooves.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the duo. I love that sort of configuration. I love trios too, but I think there is something special about the duo, giving each other space.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real nice collaborative situation.
Ron sent me a link to one of the Scratch Band things. Fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, I love his playing, and yeah.
Great. Well, there's some more things for listeners to check out to hear Lenny and John's individual works, and we hope for sure that you guys do something together again in the future and see what different kinds of sounds and ideas and grooves you guys can put together. This one is certainly interesting, and the tunes give you a lot to listen to from start to finish. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for taking the time to come on Adult Music, and thanks to Joe Brent from Adhyâropa Records for setting this up. The link to the Bandcamp page will be there at the top of the description, so make sure you get yourself a copy of this on CD right away. And we look forward to hearing more music from you two guys in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks to our adult music listening audience, and we'll be back again next week with our regular episode. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.